What if the man you loved, the king you served, the father of your child, decided one day that you were no longer convenient? What if he tried to erase your 24-year marriage and declare your daughter illegitimate also he could marry another woman? What if your own father, the king, signed your death warrant based on whispers and lies? And what if your sister, the queen, locked you away, fearing you would take her throne? In a world where a woman's voice was a whisper, how did these queens make themselves heard? They did it with words that cut deeper than any sword. Number 17, how do you win? By losing. Anne of Cleves was Queen of England for only 6 months. She outlived the king who rejected her and all of his other wives. After their first meeting, a diplomatic disaster, Henry VIII famously complained that she looked nothing like her portrait. He told his courtiers he could not bring himself to consummate the marriage. The union was annulled on July 9th, 1540, and Henry VIII needed a new wife. His third wife, Jane Seymour, had died. His search for a fourth wife was a political chess game. Thomas Cromwell, his chief minister, pushed for an alliance with the German Protestant states. The Duke of Cleves was a powerful figure. He had a sister named Anne. A portrait was commissioned from the master painter Hans Holbein the Younger. King Holbein was known for his realism, but a portrait is not a person. Henry saw the painting and agreed to the match. He was excited. He decided to surprise his new bride. He rode to Rochester, where she was staying, and burst in disguised as a common messenger. This was a tradition in some European courts. The groom would surprise the bride. It was supposed to be a romantic moment. It was not. Anne did not speak English. Henry did not speak German. She was watching a bull baiting from the window. A strange, middle-aged man came into her chambers. He was boisterous and tried to kiss her. She was confused and alarmed. She turned away. This was the King of England. He was deeply insulted. The fantasy was shattered. He felt he had been deceived. The great romance he imagined was dead on arrival. The wedding went ahead. It had to. The diplomatic stakes were too high. But the marriage was a failure. Henry complained bitterly to Cromwell. He said he had a great misliking of her. He wanted out. The political winds shifted. The alliance with the German states was no longer so important. Cromwell had failed. He would later lose his head for it. The marriage had to be undone. This was a dangerous moment for Anne. A rejected queen was in a precarious position. Catherine of Aragon had fought for years and was cast aside. Anne Boleyn had fought and was executed. But Anne of Cleves was different. She was a political realist. She saw the situation clearly. Fighting was pointless. Henry held all the power. A battle would only lead to her ruin, her exile, or worse. So she did something brilliant. She agreed with him. When the king's counselors came to her, they asked if she would consent to an annulment. They expected a fight. They got cooperation. She confirmed the marriage had not been consummated. She was calm. She was agreeable. She wrote a letter to the king. In it, she accepted the end of their marriage. She signed it, not as the queen, but as his humble servant. But here is the clapback. It was not in what she said, but in what she did next. Henry was so relieved he was generous. He gave her a massive settlement. She received Richmond Palace and Bletchley Manor. She was given a huge annual income. She became one of the wealthiest women in England. And he gave her a new title. She would be known as the King's beloved sister. This was a stroke of genius. She was no longer a discarded wife. She was a member of the royal family. She had precedence over every woman in England except the king's new wife and his daughters. She stayed in England. She lived a comfortable life. She gambled. She wore fine clothes. She ran her own estates. She visited the royal court and was treated with respect. She remained on good terms with Henry. She even got along with her replacement, Catherine Howard. She played the game better than anyone. While other queens fought for the crown, she settled for a life of freedom and wealth. Her clapback was her survival. It was her quiet triumph. By losing the title of queen, she won a life of independence that was almost unheard of for a woman of her time. She showed Henry and the world that she did not need him to thrive. She just needed his money. Number 16. What if your past came back to haunt you? Elizabeth of York became queen consort in 1486, but just a year before, her family, the House of York, had lost the throne. Her two younger brothers, the princes in the Tower, had vanished in 1483. Their fate remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Throughout her reign, men claiming to be one of her lost brothers emerged, challenging her husband, Henry II, for the crown. Elizabeth of York's life was defined by war. She was the daughter of King Edward IV. She was a princess of the House of York. Her family fought the House of Lancaster for the English throne in a series of conflicts known as the Wars of the Roses. The symbol of York was the white rose. The symbol of Lancaster was the red rose. It was a brutal dynastic struggle. When her father died, her uncle Richard III seized the throne. Her brothers, the rightful heirs, were taken to the Tower of London. And then they were gone. The war ended in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth Field. A Lancastrian claimant, Henry Tudor, defeated and killed Richard III. He became King Henry VII. To unite the warring houses, he married Elizabeth. This marriage was the foundation of the Tudor dynasty. The white rose of York and the red rose of Lancaster were combined to create the Tudor rose. Elizabeth's job was to be a symbol of peace. Her job was to produce heirs. She did both. Her firstborn son was Arthur. Her second son was Henry, the future Henry VIII. But the peace was fragile. The Yorkist cause was not dead. Many people believed one of Elizabeth's brothers had survived. This was a direct threat to her husband's rule. First came a boy named Lambert Simnel. He claimed to be the Earl of Warwick, a Yorkist cousin. The rebellion was crushed. Henry VII, in a clever move, did not execute Simnel. He put him to work in the royal kitchens. It was a way of saying, this boy is no threat. He is a nobody. Then came a more serious threat. A young man named Perkin Warbeck appeared. He claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, Elizabeth's younger brother. He was convincing. He had the manners of a prince. He gained support from foreign rulers who wanted to destabilize England. He was recognized as the rightful king by the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Scotland. For years, he was a thorn in Henry VII's side. This put Elizabeth in an impossible position. What if this man was her brother? What was she supposed to do? Her loyalty was to her husband and her children. Her entire life was dedicated to securing the Tudor dynasty. But the ghost of her Yorkist past was at the door. We have no record of her private thoughts. Her words were not written down. But her actions were a form of statement. Her clapback was her unwavering, silent loyalty to the new regime. She never once gave any indication that she believed Warbeck. She stood by Henry. She continued her duties as queen. She produced more children. She embodied the Tudor ideal. Her silence was a political statement. In a court full of whispers and spies, she said nothing that could be used against her husband. She presented a front of absolute unity. This was not weakness. It was a strategic masterpiece. By refusing to acknowledge the possibility that Warbeck was her brother, she starved his claim of its most potent fuel. If the missing prince's own sister did not believe him, who would? When Warbeck was finally captured, he confessed to being an impostor. He was executed. Elizabeth's position was secure. Her clapback was not a witty retort. It was a lifetime of careful, deliberate action. She buried her past. She built a new future. She chose her new family over the ghosts of the old one. In her quiet dignity, she told the world that the House of York was gone. The House of Tudor was here to stay. And she was its queen. Number 15, would you defy your own government for your beliefs? In the summer of 1550, 3 years before she became queen, Mary Tudor was summoned before her brother's council. King Edward VI was a devout Protestant. Mary was a staunch Catholic. The council, led by the Duke of Northumberland, had banned the Catholic Mass. Mary was the only person in the kingdom who openly defied the law. She continued to have Mass said in her private household. She was 34 years old at the time. Mary's life had been one of constant struggle. She was the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. For the first years of her life, she was an adored princess, the heir to the throne. Then her father fell in love with Anne Boleyn. He broke with the Catholic Church, divorced her mother, and married Anne. Mary was declared illegitimate. She was stripped of her title, she was separated from her mother, she was forced to serve her own baby, half-sister Elizabeth. She lived in a state of political and religious limbo for years. Her faith was the one thing they could not take from her. It was her connection to her mother. It was her identity. She clung to it fiercely. When her young half-brother Edward became king in 1447, England lurched further towards Protestantism. Statues were smashed. Altars were removed. The Latin Mass was replaced with a new English prayer book. For Mary, these were not just political changes. They were attacks on God. The council saw her as a problem. Her household was a center of Catholic resistance. Foreign ambassadors from Catholic countries, like her cousin, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, saw her as a rallying point. The council decided to force her to comply. They sent delegations to her. They argued with her. They threatened her. She would not budge. Finally, they summoned her to court. It was a public showdown. She stood before the most powerful men in the country. They told her the king, her brother, commanded her to obey the law. They told her she was setting a bad example. She was defiant. She told them her soul was God's. She would not go against her conscience. Then she delivered the clapback. She looked at them and said that her father had raised her in the Catholic faith. The council, she pointed out, had agreed with him then. They had all been Catholics. Now they were telling her that faith was wrong, but her father and her brother the king were her only family. She would obey the king in all things, she said, except in matters of religion. She went further. She reminded them of who she was. My father, the king, made a parliament, and you, my lords, have made another, she told them. She was saying their laws were temporary, but her faith was eternal. And then she turned the table. She told them she was the king's humble subject, but she was also the daughter of the king of Spain through her mother. She was a major figure on the European stage. They could not simply bully her. This was incredibly brave. She had no army. She had no real power. All she had was her lineage and her conviction. She was a lone woman standing up to the entire government, and she won. The council backed down. They were afraid of angering the Holy Roman Emperor. They allowed her to continue her private worship for a time. She had faced them down and shown them she would not be broken. Her words were a declaration of independence. She was telling them that there was a power higher than theirs, and she answered to it alone. Number 14, can a tragic end still be a final word? Catherine Howard was the fifth wife of Henry VIII. She was beheaded at the Tower of London on February 13th, 1542. She was around 19 years old. The official charge was treason for having a relationship with a courtier named Thomas Culpeper. According to a later, possibly embellished account, her last words on the scaffold were, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper." Catherine came from the powerful Howard family. She was a cousin of Anne Boleyn. She was young, lively, and by all accounts not particularly well educated. She came to court as a lady in waiting to Henry's fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. The aging king was instantly captivated by her. He called her his rose without a thorn. After his disastrous marriage to Anne of Cleves was annulled, he married Catherine quickly. He was 49, she was a teenager, Henry was besotted. He showered her with gifts. He seemed to have found a new youthfulness with his young bride. But Catherine had a past. Before she came to court, she had lived in the household of her step-grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk. The supervision there was lax. Catherine had been involved with a man named Francis Dereham. There were rumors of a pre-contract of marriage between them, which would have made her marriage to the king invalid. The past came back to haunt her. People who knew about her previous relationships came to court looking for favors. One of them, a woman named Mary Lascelles, told her brother, a Protestant reformer, about the Queen's past. The information reached Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. Cranmer was in a difficult position. He had to tell the king. He chose to do it by slipping a note to Henry during Mass. The king was devastated. At first, he refused to believe it. But an investigation was launched. Dereham was found and questioned. He confessed to a relationship with Catherine before her marriage. But he also implicated another man, Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the king's privy chamber. Culpeper was a favorite of Henry's. He and Catherine had been meeting secretly. Letters were found. The evidence was damning. Catherine was arrested. Her household was disbanded. She was held at Sion Abbey. She was terrified. She fell into a state of panic. When she was told she was to be executed, she reportedly asked for the executioner's block to be brought to her room so she could practice laying her head on it. Whether she actually said the famous final words is debated by historians. The line was first reported by a Spanish chronicler decades later. It might be a dramatic invention, but even if she did not say it, the sentiment behind it serves as a powerful final statement. It is a rejection of the life that was forced upon her. Think about what those words mean. I die a queen. This is an acknowledgement of her status. She is not dying as a common criminal. She is dying as the Queen of England. She is Henry's wife, and she is reminding everyone of that fact. But the second part is the real clapback. But I would rather have died the wife of Culpeper. This is a stunning repudiation of the king and the crown. She is saying that the title, the power, the wealth, it was all worthless. She would have preferred a life with the man she chose, even if it meant an early death. It is a declaration of love. It is a claim to her own feelings, her own desires, in a world that saw her only as a political pawn and a vessel for royal heirs. In that final moment, she is taking back her own story. She is saying that her life with Henry was a performance, but her feelings for Culpeper were real. It is a tragic, heartbreaking, and deeply human final word. It tells the powerful king that he had her title, her body, and her life, but he never had her heart. Number 13, how do you outsmart a tyrant? Catherine Parr was Henry VIII's sixth and final wife. She was a mature, twice-widowed woman when she married the king in 1543. She was also a devout Protestant reformer with a keen intellect. The court was a snake pit of religious factionalism. The conservative faction, led by Bishop Stephen Gardiner, saw the queen as a dangerous heretic. In 1546, they almost succeeded in bringing her down. Catherine was more of a nurse than a wife to the aging, ailing king. Henry was obese, in constant pain from a leg ulcer, and had a foul temper. Catherine was patient and kind. She also became a stepmother to Henry's 3 children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. She took a genuine interest in their education and helped to bring the fractured family closer together. But she was also a writer. She published her own book of prayers, a remarkable achievement for a woman at the time. Her religious leanings were clear. She held study sessions in her private rooms with her ladies in waiting. They read and discuss scripture, often from a reformist perspective. This was a dangerous game. The official religion of the country was whatever Henry said it was. He had broken with Rome, but he still held many Catholic beliefs. Heresy was still a capital crime. Bishop Gardiner and his allies saw their chance. They saw Catherine's influence over the king as a threat. They began to collect evidence against her. They whispered in the king's ear. They told him the queen was arrogant. They said she dared to lecture him on matters of theology. And Henry's ego was massive. He did not like to be challenged, especially by a woman. He began to grow suspicious. He agreed to let Gardiner draw up articles of heresy against the queen. He signed a warrant for her arrest. The trap was set. The plan was for the king's guards to arrest Catherine the next day. But the plan leaked. A courtier sympathetic to the queen found the dropped arrest warrant and took it to her. Catherine was terrified. She knew what happened to Henry's wives who displeased him. She fell into a panic. A doctor was called. The king heard of her distress and went to see her. This was her chance. She had to play the part of her life. When Henry arrived, she was the picture of a humble, devoted wife. He brought up the topic of religion, perhaps to test her. He invited her to argue with him as she usually did, but Catherine was ready. She did not argue. Instead, she submitted completely. She told him she was but a woman with all the imperfections natural to my sex. She said she had only brought up these serious topics to distract him from his pain and to learn from his great wisdom. She said to him, "Your Majesty doth know right well, neither am I, nor ever will be, so arrogant as to take upon me to teach my lord and master." It was a masterful performance. She was flattering his ego, playing on his sense of superiority. She was using the very sexism of the age as a shield. She was basically saying, how could you think that I, a silly woman, would ever dare to presume to know more than you, the great king? It worked perfectly. Henry was completely won over. Is it so, sweetheart? He reportedly said. Then we are perfect friends again. The next day, when the guards arrived to arrest her, Henry was with her in the garden. He flew into a rage and dismissed them. Catherine had outsmarted them all. Her clapback was a strategic masterpiece of submission. She did not fight fire with fire. She fought it with flattery. She understood her opponent. She knew Henry's weakness was his pride. By pretending to be the weak, foolish woman her enemies accused her of being, she exposed their plot and saved her own life. She used the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, and she did it with a perfectly feigned curtsy. Number 12. How do you politely tell someone to back off? Before she was queen, Anne Boleyn was one of the most captivating women at the English court. She was witty, stylish, and intelligent, having spent her formative years in the sophisticated courts of France. She attracted many admirers. One of them was the courtier and poet Sir Thomas Wyatt. Wyatt was a brilliant writer and a married man. He was deeply in love with Anne. He wrote poems about his unrequited love for a woman widely believed to be her. The Tudor court was a place of high romance and political maneuvering. Love and power were deeply intertwined. A relationship, or even a flirtation, with a powerful woman could advance a man's career. Anne was a rising star. She had caught the king's eye. This made her both desirable and dangerous. Wyatt was part of a circle of poets and courtiers who engaged in the games of courtly love. This was a tradition where a knight or poet would devote himself to a noble lady, often a married one. It was supposed to be chaste and idealized, but the lines were often blurry. Wyatt's poems, however, suggest a real and painful passion. In one famous poem, Whoso Lists to Hunt, he describes his beloved as a deer that belongs to Caesar, a clear reference to the king. Anne was an expert at this game. She knew how to attract men and keep them at a distance. She was playing for the biggest prize of all, the crown. She could not afford any scandal. She had to be seen as virtuous and untouchable, especially by the king. A public flirtation with a poet like Wyatt was a liability. At some point, she had to make her position clear to him. We don't have a transcript of their conversations, but a story, recorded by Wyatt's grandson years later, gives us a glimpse of her style. According to the account, Wyatt was pressing his affections. Anne had to shut him down, but she couldn't afford to make an enemy. She had to be firm but graceful. Her response was a perfect example of a courtly clapback. She reportedly told him, "My lord, I hear that you are a great maker of ballads, but I pray you make no more for me." It is a stunningly effective line. First, she starts with a compliment. "My lord, I hear that you are a great maker of ballads." She acknowledges his talent. She shows that she is aware of his reputation. This softens the blow. But then comes the rejection. "But I pray you make no more for me." It is polite. She is not shouting. She is not making a scene. She uses the word pray as if she is asking a favor, but the message is unmistakable. Stop. I am not your muse. I am not the subject of your romantic fantasies. Your attention is unwelcome. The line is brilliant because it operates on multiple levels. On the surface, it is a simple request, but underneath it is a command. It is also a warning. She is reminding him that his poems are public. They are being read and talked about. They are linking her name with his. In the high-stakes world of the Tudor court, that kind of association could be fatal. And she is telling him to back off before he causes trouble for both of them. It is a masterclass in setting boundaries. She did not insult him. She did not create a public drama. She delivered a clear, concise, and devastatingly final message with the elegance of a queen. She was drawing a line in the sand, and she did it with a quiet authority that left no room for argument. Number 11. Who's really in charge of your life? Elizabeth. I was queen for 44 years. She never married. This was a constant source of anxiety for her counselors. They needed an heir to secure the Tudor succession. They constantly pressured her to choose a husband. One of the most persistent candidates was her childhood friend and favorite, Robert Dudley. Dudley was handsome, ambitious, and clearly in love with the Queen. Many people, including Dudley himself, believed he would one day be king consort. Elizabeth and Dudley's relationship was the great soap opera of her reign. They were incredibly close. They flirted publicly. She appointed him Master of the Horse. She gave him Kenilworth Castle. She called him her eyes, but there was a problem. Dudley was already married. His wife, Amy Robsart, lived in the country while he was at court. In 1560, Amy was found dead at the bottom of a flight of stairs with a broken neck. A huge scandal erupted. Was it an accident or was it murder? Many people suspected Dudley had arranged his wife's death so he would be free to marry the Queen. The scandal made a marriage between them politically impossible, at least for a time, but Dudley never gave up hope. He remained a powerful figure at court and a constant presence in Elizabeth's life. He was also possessive. He did not like it when the Queen showed favor to other men. He saw other suitors as rivals. At one point, there were serious negotiations for Elizabeth to marry a foreign prince, the Archduke Charles of Austria. Dudley was furious. He did everything he could to sabotage the match. According to a report from the Spanish ambassador, this led to a major confrontation between Elizabeth and Dudley. They had a furious argument. Dudley, in his frustration, may have overstepped his bounds. He may have tried to assert some kind of control over her, to tell her what she should or should not do. Elizabeth's response was swift and absolute. She looked at her favorite, the man she probably loved more than any other, and she laid down the law. She told him, "I will have but one mistress here and no master." It is one of her most famous quotes. And it is utterly devastating. Let's break it down. "I will have but one mistress here." She is referring to herself. The word mistress at the time did not necessarily mean a romantic partner. It meant a woman in a position of authority. A female master, she is stating a simple fact. I am the one in charge. The boss here is a woman, me. The second part is the real sting. And no master. She is speaking directly to Dudley. She is telling him, "You will not control me. You are not my superior. You will never be my master." She is putting him firmly in his place. She is reminding him that no matter how close they are, no matter what personal feelings she has for him, she is the queen and he is the subject. The line is a perfect encapsulation of her political philosophy. She was a female monarch in a man's world. She had to constantly assert her authority. She had to show everyone, her counselors, foreign kings, and even the man she loved, that she was the one with the power. With that one sentence, she ended the argument. She defined the terms of their relationship, and she made it crystal clear to Dudley and to anyone else who might have forgotten that Elizabeth the woman might love him, but Elizabeth the Queen ruled alone. Number 10. What if your entire identity was put on trial? For more than 2 decades, Catherine of Aragon was the Queen of England. She was the devoted wife of Henry VIII. She was the daughter of the legendary Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain. She was pious, popular, and a skilled diplomat in her own right. And then Henry decided he wanted a new wife, Anne Boleyn, who he hoped could give him a son. To do this, he needed to annul his marriage to Catherine. He claimed it was invalid because she had been briefly married to his older brother Arthur. The Bible, he argued, forbade a man from marrying his brother's widow. Catherine maintained that her marriage to Arthur had never been consummated. Therefore, her marriage to Henry was perfectly valid in the eyes of God. The Pope refused to grant the annulment. Henry decided to take matters into his own hands. He convened a special court in England to rule on the case. It was held at Blackfriars Priory in London in the summer of 1529. It was a show trial. The outcome was already decided. But Catherine was not going to go quietly. The scene was set. The king sat on one side of the court. The papal legates, Cardinal Wolsey and Cardinal Campeggio, sat as judges. Catherine was summoned to speak. She walked past the judges. She walked past the assembled bishops and nobles. She went straight to Henry. And then she did something shocking. The Queen of England knelt at her husband's feet. All eyes were on her. The court was silent. And then she began to speak. Her voice was full of passion and conviction. She was not addressing the judges. She was speaking directly to her husband in front of everyone. "Sire," she began, "I beseech you for all the love that hath been between us, let me have justice and right." She then delivered a speech that was a clapback for the ages. It was a defense of her honor, her marriage, and her entire life. "I have been your wife these 20 years or more," she reminded him, "and have given you divers children, although it hath pleased God to call them from this world." She was reminding him of their shared history, of the children they had lost, and of her loyalty. She went on. "When he had me at the first, I take God to be my judge. I was a true maid without touch of man." She was directly addressing the central point of his case, the consummation of her first marriage. She was calling on God as her witness. She was daring them to call her a liar. Then she turned her fire on his motives. She told him that she had been a loyal and obedient wife in all things. "Wherein have I offended you?" she asked. The question hung in the air. The unspoken answer was that her only offense was her failure to produce a male heir. She was exposing the personal, selfish nature of his great religious quest. Finally, she stood up. She made a low curtsy to the king. And then, instead of returning to her seat, she walked straight out of the courtroom. Someone called for her to come back. "It is no matter," she said to her attendant. "It is no indifferent court for me, therefore I will not tarry. Go on." She refused to recognize the court's authority. She would not participate in her own destruction. It was an act of incredible defiance. She had publicly shamed the king. She had appealed to his conscience, reminded him of his duty, and exposed the injustice of the proceedings. She had turned his legal spectacle into a personal drama, with him as the villain. She lost the trial, of course. But in the court of public opinion and in the annals of history, she won the day. Her speech was the ultimate clapback of a woman who refused to be erased. Number 9, is it better to be feared or loved? Elizabeth I was a master of political theater. She knew how to use words to inspire, to intimidate, and to control. In 1586, she was faced with a difficult decision. Her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, had been a prisoner in England for nearly 19 years. Mary was a Catholic with a strong claim to the English throne. She had become the focus of numerous plots to depose Elizabeth. A new plot, the Babington Plot, was uncovered. There was clear evidence that Mary had approved of a plan to assassinate Elizabeth. Parliament was baying for blood. They demanded Mary's execution. They saw her as a mortal threat to the Queen and the nation. But Elizabeth hesitated. To execute another anointed queen was a terrible precedent. Mary was her cousin. She was the mother of a king, James VI of Scotland. Killing her could provoke a war with Scotland or Catholic powers like Spain. Elizabeth agonized over the decision. She was under immense pressure from her counselors, led by William Cecil and Francis Walsingham. They presented her with the petition from Parliament, urging her to sign the death warrant. Elizabeth's response was not a simple yes or no. It was a long, complex, and brilliant speech. It was a political clapback designed to put Parliament in its place. She started by thanking them for their loyalty. She played the part of the devoted monarch who cared only for her people's safety. But then she began to scold them. "I have had good experience and trial of this world," she told them. "I know what it is to be a subject, what to be a sovereign, what to have good neighbors, and sometimes meet evil willers." She was telling them that she understood the complexities of power in a way they never could. Then she challenged their bloodlust. She spoke of her own merciful nature. "Your judgment I condemn not, neither do I mistake your reasons," she said. "But pray you to accept my thankfulness, excuse my doubtfulness, and take in good part my answer less." My answer less. It was a classic Elizabeth I move. She was refusing to be rushed. She was telling them that she, and she alone, would make the final decision. But the real clapback came when she addressed their fears for her safety. They were worried she would be assassinated. She turned this around. She told them she did not fear death. "For my own life," she declared, "I do not desire to live, but to reign with your loves." Then came the zinger. She warned them about what could happen if they got what they wanted. If she died, she said, "you may have a worse." This was a chillingly effective threat. The worse she was referring to was civil war. it was religious conflict. It was the chaos that would ensue if the succession was not clear. She was reminding them that as much as they might dislike her indecision, she was the only thing standing between them and anarchy. She was the only guarantee of stability. The speech was a masterpiece of manipulation. She appeared to be humble, but she was asserting her absolute authority. She seemed to be indecisive, but she was buying herself time and keeping her options open, and she was subtly reminding her loyal but pushy Parliament that they needed her far more than she needed them. She was the queen. The decision was hers, and they would do well to remember that. Number 8. How do you respond to a public insult? In 1597, an ambassador from King Sigismund III of Poland arrived at the English court. He was there to protest England's interference with Polish trade with Spain. England was at war with Spain, and English ships had been seizing Polish vessels. The ambassador, a man named Paweł Dzielinski, was arrogant. He believed he could intimidate the aging queen. He was granted an audience with Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace. The court was assembled, the queen was on her throne, the ambassador strode in. He delivered his speech in Latin, the international language of diplomacy. But his tone was not diplomatic, it was insolent. He lectured the queen, he accused England of breaking international law. He threatened her with the displeasure of his king. The English court was shocked into silence. This was a flagrant insult to their monarch. Everyone looked at the queen. She was 63 years old. They expected her to consult with her counselors. They expected a delayed, carefully worded, written response. That is not what happened. As soon as the ambassador finished, Elizabeth, still on her throne, began to speak. She did not speak in English. She replied in fluent, furious Latin. Her response was completely improvised. And it was devastating. "Who? Quam decepta fui," she began. "Alice, how I have been deceived." She explained she had been expecting an ambassador, but instead she had found a herald, someone who had come to declare war, not negotiate peace. She turned his own arguments against him. He had spoken of the law of nations. She showed him that her understanding of it was far superior to his. "You from your king," she thundered, "who is but newly elected, and I from the house of my ancestors, which has ruled this kingdom for many generations." She was drawing a sharp contrast between his upstart king and her ancient established monarchy. It was a brutal put-down. She went on to mock his knowledge and his rhetoric. "I had heard that you were a man of letters," she said, dripping with sarcasm. "But your oration has not shown it." She systematically dismantled his case, point by point, all in flawless classical Latin. The climax of her speech was a display of pure, unadulterated power. She looked down at the stunned ambassador and declared, "I am the anointed queen of this kingdom, and I will not be threatened by a foreign prince." As she finished by telling him that if his king continued to be an annoyance, she would deal with him. When she was done, she turned to her astonished courtiers and said in English, "God's death, my lords, I have been forced this day to do that which I never did in my life, to be a speaker of my own cause." The court erupted in applause. The Polish ambassador was utterly humiliated. He had come expecting to bully an old woman. He had instead been intellectually and politically annihilated by one of the sharpest minds in Europe. The clapback was not just a victory for Elizabeth, it was a demonstration to the entire world that the Queen of England was still a force to be reckoned with. Number 7, can you be loyal to two opposing forces? It's Mary. I was the first queen regnant of England. Her reign is often remembered for the religious persecutions that earned her the nickname Bloody Mary. But it was also a reign defined by a deep and painful conflict of loyalties. She was loyal to her country, England, but she was also loyal to her husband, Philip II of Spain, and to her Catholic faith. These loyalties often pulled her in opposite directions. In 1557, England was dragged into a war between Spain and France. The war was Philip's War. It had nothing to do with English interests. In fact, it was disastrous for England. The country was already in financial trouble. The war was expensive. And it put England's last continental possession, the port of Calais, at risk. Calais had been an English territory for over 200 years. It was a source of immense national pride. It was a strategic foothold in Europe, but it was expensive to maintain and difficult to defend. In the winter of 1558, the French launched a surprise attack. The English garrison was undermanned and unprepared. After a short siege, Calais fell. The loss of Calais was a devastating blow to English morale. It was a national humiliation. And the blame fell squarely on the Queen. Her marriage to the Spanish king, which was already unpopular, was now seen as the direct cause of the disaster. People said she had sacrificed English interests for the sake of her husband. Mary was heartbroken. She was already in poor health. And she was suffering from a phantom pregnancy, convinced she was carrying an heir when she was in fact terminally ill. The loss of Calais was the final, crushing blow. She felt she had failed her country. Sometime during this period, she made a statement that has become her most famous and most poignant quote. She was speaking to her attendants about her grief. She told them that her sorrow was so deep, it was a physical part of her. "When I am dead and opened," she said, "you shall find Calais lying in my heart." This is a heartbreaking line. It is a raw expression of personal and political pain. But it is also a kind of clapback. It is a clapback against the accusations that she did not care about England. It is a defiant statement of her patriotism. She is saying to her critics, "You think I don't love my country? My love for this country and my grief at its loss is so profound that it is literally etched on my heart." She is claiming her Englishness. She is rejecting the idea that her identity as a Catholic and as Philip's wife somehow made her less of an English monarch. The quote is a testament to her divided soul. She was trapped between her duty to her husband and her duty to her kingdom. The loss of Calais was the tragic result of that conflict. Her words are a final, desperate attempt to make her people understand that she too felt the pain of that loss more deeply than any of them could ever imagine. It is the cry of a queen who believed to her dying day that she had a true English heart. Number 6, what is the price of honesty? The letter is dated May 6th, 1536. It was written from the Tower of London. The author was Anne Boleyn, Queen of England. The recipient was her husband, King Henry VIII. She was a prisoner, accused of treason and adultery. She knew she was going to die. The letter is her final, desperate appeal. It is also one of the most remarkable documents of the Tudor period. It is a masterpiece of rhetoric, a plea for mercy, and a furious, defiant clapback. Anne had been queen for just 3 years. She had failed to give Henry the son he craved. Her sharp tongue and reformist religious views had made her many enemies at court. A faction led by Thomas Cromwell conspired to bring her down. They produced a series of wild accusations against her, including incest with her own brother. The charges were almost certainly false, but they were enough. She was arrested and taken to the Tower. The letter begins with a plea of innocence. "Your Grace's displeasure and my imprisonment are things so strange unto me," she writes. She says she cannot understand why she is there, but then the tone shifts. She moves from confusion to a demand for justice. "Try me, good king," she challenges him, "but let me have a lawful trial and let not my sworn enemies sit as my accusers and my judges." She is calling out the corruption of the process. She is demanding a fair hearing, which she knows she will not get. She then addresses the core of the issue, the king's desire for another woman, Jane Seymour. "You have chosen me from a low estate to be your queen and companion," she reminds him. Then she delivers a subtle but devastating blow. "Let not any light fancy or bad counsel of mine enemies withdraw your princely favor from me." She is calling Jane Seymour a light fancy. She is dismissing her rival as a passing whim. The most powerful part of the letter is her defense of her own honor. She knows Henry wants to annul their marriage and declare their daughter Elizabeth illegitimate. She will not stand for it. She warns him that God will judge him for his actions. She also makes a prophecy. She says that his conscience will one day prick him for what he has done. The final paragraph is a mix of desperation and defiance. She makes one last plea for her life, but if she must die, she says, then she asks for mercy for the innocent men accused with her. And then the closing line, it is a clapback that echoes through history. My last and only request shall be that myself may only bear the burden of your grace's displeasure, and that it may not touch the innocent souls of those poor gentlemen who, as I understand, are likewise in strait imprisonment for my sake. If I have ever found favor in your sight, if ever the name of Anne Boleyn hath been pleasing in your ears, then let me obtain this request. She is turning his own affection for her into a weapon. She is reminding him of the love he once had for her, the name he was once obsessed with. She is using his own past feelings to shame him. The authenticity of the letter is debated by some historians. We only have a copy, not the original, but its voice is so powerful, so convincing, that for centuries it has been accepted as the last cry of a doomed queen. It is the sound of a woman who, even in the face of certain death, refused to be silenced. Number 5. How do you politely call someone a liar and a hypocrite? Catherine of Aragon's life was destroyed by Henry VIII's desire for an annulment. The king's case rested on a single point, that Catherine's first marriage to his brother Arthur had been consummated. If it had, then her marriage to Henry was invalid. Catherine's entire defense rested on the claim that it had not. She maintained she had come to Henry's bed a virgin. After her dramatic walkout from the court at Blackfriars, the pressure on her only increased. Henry sent delegations of his most powerful counselors to persuade her to give in. One of these delegations included Cardinal Wolsey, the architect of the king's policy, and Cardinal Campeggio, the pope's legate. They came to her at the Palace of Bridewell. They told her it would be better for everyone if she just gave up the fight. They suggested she could save face by retiring to a nunnery. Catherine was in a private chamber with her ladies in waiting. She was at her needlework. When the cardinals were announced, she came out to meet them, still holding a skein of silk around her neck. This was a deliberate piece of theater. She was presenting herself not as a queen arguing legal matters, but as a simple wronged wife interrupted at her domestic tasks. Wolsey began to speak to her in Latin. She cut him off. "Speak to me in English," she commanded, "for I thank God, speak and understand English, though I do know some Latin." She was making a point. She was the Queen of England. She would be addressed in the language of her people. They then began to make their case. They urged her to put her trust in the king. They told her that he was a merciful prince and that he would treat her well if she just submitted to his will. Catherine listened patiently, and then she unleashed a clapback that was both furious and perfectly composed. She turned to them and said, "As for my counsel, in which you of my counsel be, I will not refuse, but will be glad to hear their advice. But as for you," she said, looking directly at Wolsey, "I take you not for my friend." She then accused him directly of being the source of all her troubles. She said he was working against her out of malice. Then she addressed the central lie of the king's case. She told them she had been a virgin when she married Henry. She said she was willing to take her oath on it. She had lived as his wife for over 20 years. She had borne him children. And now he was casting her aside based on a lie. She finished with a statement of pure, unshakable conviction. She told them she would not go to a nunnery. She would not abandon her title. She would not allow her daughter to be made a bastard. "God has not so blinded me," she declared, "that I should confess myself to have been the king's harlot for 24 years. The word harlot was a thunderclap. It was the bluntest possible term. She was saying, "If my marriage was never valid, then what have I been all this time? I have been your king's whore, and my daughter, the princess, is a bastard. I will never agree to that." She was forcing them to confront the brutal human reality of what they were asking her to do. She was calling out their legalistic arguments for what they were, a flimsy cover for a cruel and selfish act. She was a queen, a wife, and a mother, and she would not let them forget it. Number 4, how do you apologize without admitting you were wrong? Anne Boleyn's final speech on the scaffold is a masterpiece of subtext. On May 19th, 1536, she was led out to a scaffold on Tower Green. She was to be executed by a skilled swordsman brought over from France, a small mercy from the king. She knew a crowd was watching. She knew her last words would be recorded and repeated. She could have screamed about the injustice. She could have proclaimed her innocence. She did neither. Instead, she gave a short, carefully worded speech that was, in its own way, the most savage clapback of her life. "Good Christian people," she began, "I am come hither to die, for according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it." This first line is brilliant. She is not saying the law is just. She is simply stating a fact the law has condemned her. By saying she will speak nothing against it, she is actually highlighting the fact that there is much that could be said against it. It is a classic case of saying something by not saying it. Then she continued, "I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that, whereof I am accused and condemned to die." Again, she is drawing attention to her accusers and the accusations without naming them. She is taking the high road, appearing to be forgiving and pious. But for everyone present who knew the political situation, her words were a clear indictment of her enemies, like Thomas Cromwell, and the sham trial she had endured. The core of the speech, and the most devastating part of it, concerns the king. "But I pray God save the king," she said, "and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle and sovereign lord." This sounds like praise, but it is dripping with the blackest irony. Henry, the gentle and merciful prince, had pursued her for years, broken with the church to marry her, and then, when she failed to give him a son, had her framed and executed. To praise his mercy at the moment of her own state-sanctioned murder is an act of supreme sarcasm. She is praising him for qualities that everyone present knows he does not possess in this situation. She is holding up a mirror to his tyranny. She is, in effect, damning him with faint praise. She concluded her speech by asking for prayers. "And if any person will meddle of my cause, I require them to judge the best. And thus I take my leave of the world and of you all, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me." This is a final plea for history to be kind to her. She is asking future generations to look at the facts and to judge the best, to see the truth behind the official charges. With her final words, Anne Boleyn cemented her legacy. She did not die a screaming victim. She died a queen, composed and in control. She followed the script of a Tudor execution, but she filled the words with a hidden meaning that was unmistakable. Her speech was a final, brilliant act of defiance. It was a clapback that ensured that while Henry might have taken her life, he would never have the final word on her story. Number 3. What do you say when the whole world is against you? Mary I ascended to the throne in 1553 after the death of her half-brother Edward VI, but her succession was not straightforward. A cabal of Protestant nobles led by the Duke of Northumberland tried to place Edward's cousin, Lady Jane Grey, on the throne instead. They wanted to prevent a Catholic from taking power. For a few tense days, there were 2 queens in England. But the people rallied to Mary. She was the legitimate heir, the daughter of Henry VIII. Northumberland's coup collapsed. Jane Grey became a prisoner in the Tower. Mary's position was still insecure. Early in her reign, a major rebellion broke out. It was led by Sir Thomas Wyatt the Younger. The rebellion was fueled by anti-Spanish sentiment. Mary had announced her intention to marry Philip of Spain, and many English people feared their country would become a Spanish satellite. Wyatt's forces marched on London. The situation was critical. Mary's own council advised her to flee the city for her own safety. She refused. Instead of running, she went to the Guildhall, the center of the city of London, to address the people directly. It was a risky move. The mood in the city was tense. Support for the rebellion was uncertain. Mary, who was not a natural public speaker, had to rally the citizens to her cause. Her speech was a triumph. She began by reminding them of who she was. "I am your queen," she told them, "to whom at my coronation you have promised your allegiance and obedience." She was reminding them of their sacred oath. Then she addressed the rebels' stated reason for rising up her marriage. She did something remarkable for a monarch. She made herself vulnerable. She spoke to them not just as a queen, but as a woman. "I cannot tell how naturally a mother loveth her children," she said, "for I was never the mother of any. But certainly, if a prince and governor may as naturally and earnestly love her subjects as the mother doth her child, then assure yourselves that I, being your lady and mistress, do as earnestly and tenderly love and favor you." She was creating a bond with them, casting herself as the mother of the nation. Then she delivered the clapback. She told them that her marriage was for the good of the kingdom, but, she said, if Parliament determined that the marriage was not for the honor and profit of the realm, she would not go through with it. Then she made a powerful personal promise. "For I assure you," she declared, "I do not so much mind my wedding as I mind my faith and your conservation." She was putting her country and her faith above her own personal life. The most powerful line of the speech was her final defiant challenge to the rebels and to any waverers in the crowd. She told them she was the daughter of Henry VIII, and she would not be intimidated. "On the word of a queen," she promised, "I cannot tell what to fear." She was showing them that she was not afraid. And if she was not afraid, why should they be? The speech was a massive success. The citizens of London were won over. They rallied to her side. When Wyatt's rebels reached the city, they found the gates closed against them. The rebellion failed. Mary had faced her first great test as queen, and she had won. She had done it not with an army, but with words. She had shown her people that she had the heart and the courage of a true Tudor monarch. Number 2, how do you tell your people you are one of them? In 1588, England faced its greatest threat. Philip II of Spain, the most powerful ruler in Europe, had sent a massive fleet, the Spanish Armada, to invade the country. The goal was to depose the Protestant Queen Elizabeth and restore Catholicism. England was a small island nation. Spain was a global superpower. The odds were not good. As the Spanish fleet sailed up the English Channel, Elizabeth's army gathered at Tilbury, a town on the Thames estuary, to defend the approach to London. The mood was tense. These were not professional soldiers, but citizen soldiers, farmers and merchants. They were preparing to fight for their lives, their homes, and their country. Elizabeth decided she needed to be with them. Against the advice of her counselors, who feared for her safety, she traveled to Tilbury to address her troops. She arrived on a white horse, wearing a silver breastplate over a white velvet dress. It was an iconic image of a warrior queen. She rode among the soldiers, then she stood before them to speak. The speech she gave is one of the most famous in English history. It is a perfect example of a leader connecting with her people in a moment of crisis. She began by acknowledging their concerns. "My loving people," she said, "we have been persuaded by some that are careful of our safety to take heed how we commit ourselves to armed multitudes for fear of treachery." She was telling them that she knew some of her advisors thought it was dangerous for her to be there, but she was dismissing that fear. "I do assure you," she declared, "I do not desire to live to distrust my faithful and loving people." She was telling them that she trusted them completely. Then she laid out the stakes. They were fighting for my kingdom, my honor, and my blood. She was making it clear that this was not just a political conflict. It was personal. It was a fight for the very soul of England. And then came the most famous lines of the speech, the ultimate clapback to anyone who doubted her ability to lead because she was a woman. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman," she said, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." This line is a work of genius. She is acknowledging the prevailing sexism of her age. Yes, she is a woman. But she is telling them to look past her physical form. Inside, she is as strong and as brave as any male monarch. She is not just any king, she is a King of England, invoking the legacy of her powerful father, Henry VIII, and her grandfather, Henry VII. She is claiming their strength as her own. She finished by promising to fight alongside them. "I myself will take up arms," she pledged. "I myself will be your general, judge, and rewarder of every one of your virtues in the field. She was telling them that she was not some distant monarch, safe in a palace. She was their leader, on the battlefield with them, sharing their fate. The speech had an electrifying effect. The morale of the troops soared. They were ready to fight and die for their queen. As it happened, the battle was won at sea. The English navy, aided by bad weather, defeated and scattered the armada. The land invasion never happened, but the speech at Tilbury became legendary. It was the moment Elizabeth fused her own identity with that of her people. She was no longer just their queen, she was England itself. Number 1, what does a good person owe a bad king? The year is 1533. The great matter is coming to a head. Henry VIII has broken with the Catholic Church. He has had his marriage to Catherine of Aragon declared null and void. He has married a pregnant Anne Boleyn. He is now demanding that his subjects swear an oath, the oath of succession, recognizing his new marriage as lawful and his daughter with Catherine Mary as illegitimate. To refuse the oath is treason. The penalty is death. Sir Thomas More was one of the most respected men in England. He was a brilliant lawyer, a humanist scholar, a friend of Erasmus, and the former Lord Chancellor of England. He was also a devout Catholic. He had resigned as Chancellor because he could not, in good conscience, support the king's break with Rome. But he was a careful man. He did not speak out publicly against the king. He retired to his home in Chelsea and hoped the storm would pass him by. It did not. The king demanded that More swear the oath. More refused. He was not a revolutionary. He did not want to be a martyr. He simply said that his conscience would not allow him to take the oath as it was written. He was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. For over a year they tried to break him. They sent delegations to argue with him. They threatened him. They took away his books and his writing materials. His family, including his beloved daughter Meg, begged him to give in. All he had to do was say a few words. But for More, words had meaning. An oath was a sacred promise to God. He could not lie. His trial was a formality. The key witness against him was a man named Richard Rich, the Solicitor General. Rich testified that, in a private conversation in the Tower, More had denied the king's supremacy over the church. This was treason. More denied saying it. He knew Rich was lying. After the guilty verdict was delivered, More was finally allowed to speak his mind freely. He had been silent for months, carefully avoiding treasonous words. Now, with nothing left to lose, he spoke. He told the court that he could not accept the act of supremacy because it was contrary to the laws of God and the Holy Catholic Church. And then he turned his attention to Richard Rich, the man whose perjury had just condemned him. He looked at the judges and the jury, and he delivered the coldest, most intellectually brutal clapback in Tudor history. In good faith, Rich, he said, "I am sorrier for your perjury than for my own peril." It is an absolutely devastating line. He is not angry. He is not shouting. He is expressing pity. He is telling Rich that while his own body might be in danger, Rich's immortal soul is damned. He is saying, I am going to die, but that is a temporary problem. You have to live with the fact that you have lied under oath and sold your soul for political advancement. And for that, I feel sorry for you. He then proceeded to destroy Rich's credibility. He reminded the court that Rich was a man of no standing, known for his ambition and lack of morals. You were esteemed very light of your tongue, More said, a great dicer, and of no commendable fame. He asked the court a simple question. Is it credible that I should so unadvisedly transgress the statute and utter the secrets of my conscience to Mr. Rich, who of all others I have for his corrupt and perjured life most abhorred and detested? He was not just defending himself. He was prosecuting his accuser. He was using his final moments not to beg for his life, but to speak the truth. He was showing the world the moral bankruptcy of the men who were about to kill him. His clapback was not just a clever retort. It was a final, unshakable stand for the principle that some things, conscience, truth, and faith, are more important than life itself.